What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. So we're on to the final round of the Rugby Championship coming up this weekend, which means, of course, we need to do the preview videos. This is where we go over the teams that have been announced, check out some of the changes, so we think some good picks, some bad picks, and finally, we give a score prediction. So starting off with the All Blacks versus the Wallabies. Now, last week we got to see this. This was a really tight game, both teams taking advantage in different sections. We do have the match report on the channel if you want to go back and check that one out just to refresh the memory. But of course, it did end in that quite controversial call. Seen both arguments from both sides, people going on with it, coming in from the referee for time wasting. And having watched it back quite a few more times, I actually feel like I'm leaning more towards, I actually think that was the correct call. I've seen some more angles of it. The coverage that happened live wasn't very good. I literally went from watching a highlight to immediately the penalty being blown from the coverage in the UK. So the coverage, I think, if you look at some different angles, I think the referee gave him a lot of opportunities to actually get that ball out. But whether it was the right time in the game to make that call for the very first time is still up for dispute. But it did mean that from the back of that decision, that All Blacks managed to score that final try coming in from Geordie Barrett in the corner and saw them seal out that game. So they'll feel confident going in this week. So going into the team that's been announced this week, where we do see a couple of changes going on, and we'll get to them as to sort of reasons why a little bit when we get through the team. So starting off in this front row, Ethan de Groot, Cody Taylor and Tyrell Lomax. Now, Cody Taylor going in here at hooker. I really thought Taukei'aho had a really good game. I thought he was really impressive. I'm not really sure why Cody Taylor's got in here. I thought maybe there was going to be an injury reason, but Taukei'aho's on the bench, so no real reason for this. They're obviously just trying to mix it up. Maybe they want a strong hooker to come on in that second half, and maybe they're going to look to go for driving mauls when some Australian forwards are tired, and maybe they'll see if they can get some tries later on in the game. For me, I would have liked to have seen Taukei'aho stay on. I think he played really well. In the lock department, Brodie Retallick and Sam Whitelock retained their 4-5 lock department. I thought, again, good last game. Line-out situation was working better for them. Brodie Retallick get himself in the mix quite a lot in that game as well, so nice to see him still retaining that number 4 shirt. We've got a couple of switch-ups in the back row. Akira Ioane comes in the 6 shirt over Scott Barrett. Dalton Papali'i retains in at 7, and Ardie Savea in at 8. So you won't be seeing any Sam Cane. We won't be seeing any Scott Barrett in the starting lineup, and Ardie Savea coming in at number 8. So big switch-ups across the park. Of course, we did occasionally see these yellow cards coming in for Papali'i every now and again. So hopefully just gets the discipline under wraps, because he's a really good player. He's really good with ball in hand. We haven't really got to see Papali'i launch yet with ball in hand, try-scoring potential. But Ardie Savea coming back into the team will be a real big boost in that back row. In the halfback partnership, Aaron Smith and Richie Mwanga retain the halfback partnership. That worked really well last week. Richie Mwanga just scoring points for days from the boot. Nice to see. In the centre partnership, big switch up here. Now, obviously, we had the big injury coming in last week from Darcy Swain, who's now received his ban. So New Zealand have had to come up with a new centre partnership, and it means Geordie Barrett fits in at inside centre with Rieko Ioane outside him. Now, I've never seen Geordie Barrett play in centre that I can remember. There's people that watch this channel that are far more versed in New Zealand rugby history than myself. I think of Geordie Barrett as a fullback, as a winger, and then maybe secondarily as a fly half. That's how I see him from my perspective. In terms of centre partnership, I have no idea how he plays at centre. I find this to be a bit of a strange call to have Geordie Barrett move to that centre when there is other dedicated inside centres over in New Zealand that I think could do this job perfectly well. I'm not going to say Geordie Barrett's a bad player. Maybe having him in that 12 allows you to do sort of what England do with the 10-12 double fly half standard, 2 people kicking, 2 distributors. Maybe that's how they'll go about it. But seeing as we have Tuivasa Sheck on the bench, who I believe at club level is a bit more of a dedicated inside centre, I maybe would have liked to have seen him there rather than Geordie Barrett, and then maybe had Geordie Barrett on the bench to cover all those positions in case of an injury. We'll have to see how he gets on. Hopefully he has a good game. And then in the back 3, Caleb Clark, Will Jordan and Beauden Barrett now coming in that fullback position. Now, Caleb Clark's had quite a good championship, to be fair. He's knocking people out. He's scoring tries. He's making good meters. So, no real bad things to say from him. Will Jordan came alive last week, actually managed to get himself over that try line. He's had a quiet championship. He hasn't been able to get involved the way I expected him to. Maybe teams are just shutting him down a lot more, but I really don't think he's been getting that ball in a great deal of space recently. Beauden Barrett coming in at the 15 shirt. Now, I know he can play fullback. I prefer him at the number 10 shirt, but I know some people actually do prefer him at fullback. Again, now one thing about this New Zealand team is there's an awful lot of versatility about this set of backs. I mean, Beauden Barrett can play your fullback. You can also move to 10 later on in the game if Richie Mwunga's not performing. You can also move Geordie Barrett to fullback to cover that. Geordie Barrett can move to a wing. Geordie Barrett can play 10. Will Jordan can move to fullback if you want to move Geordie Barrett onto the wing. There is a lot of combinations here. So I think it's quite nice to see a depth where so many players are comfortable playing multiple positions. Bit of a nightmare if you're playing the fantasy because you have no idea how this team is going to go. But maybe I would have just liked to seen Geordie Barrett on the bench and just been a bit of a super sub to come on that game in almost any position. Because Barrett could have moved to 10, Geordie could have come on at fullback, or maybe Geordie could have come straight on at fly half, or maybe Geordie could have come on at centre or wing, depending on who's doing well. I think that might have been the better move, but hey, what do I know about being a manager of a rugby team? Moving on quickly then to take a look at the bench, where of course we have Taukeaho, as we've already said, Tuanga Fassi and Nepo Laulala could have come in that second half. So maybe they're going for a bit of a power second half. Maybe they're hoping the Australian forwards will tire themselves out a bit. Maybe they're thinking there'll be potential for some tries from some of the big boys coming on later in that game. Rest of the replacement forwards, Tupo Vai and Hoskins Sotutu. Again, Sotutu not come into this game that much over the championship. I would have liked to see a bit more from him. I think he's a good player as well, but it's just hard to get in this team with so many big names ahead of you. And then in the replacement backs, Finlay Christie, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, as we've already mentioned. Maybe I would have liked to see him start. And then finally, Sevu Reece, who's a name I feel like we haven't said at all through this championship. It's nice to see Sevu Reece back in this team. I think of him more as a right wing. I'm sure he's more than capable of playing both wings. But again, like we said already, that back setup quite versatile for the All Blacks. So overall, I think this is a good New Zealand team. Obviously, they've had to make a couple of switches just to cover different positions. 5-3 split. Interesting, because of course this is now the final round. This is the chance to win the tournament. New Zealand are currently top of the table. South Africa not far behind, and I do believe there is actually the potential for Australia to overtake and actually win. They need a couple of results to go really their way, but I think it can be done mathematically. Bit difficult for me over here in the UK. I'm so used to watching Six Nations scoring. Rugby Championship scoring of points and stuff is slightly different, so it's a bit more tricky for me to try and understand some of that, so I'm trying my best to learn some of that stuff. But I believe Australia can win, but going for the 5-3 split here shows they're not making a switch. They're not going to go for the 6-2 and just use the forwards. They're not just going to try and power this game over. They might be playing a bit more expansive. I mean, they've got a big switch up on the back setup. There's the chance that we could be seeing some big tries. There could be the opportunity here for New Zealand to just go for a massive, massive score, unleash the backs and let the backs go. Really, really excited to see how this team gets on. On to the Wallabies then, who of course will probably be feeling a bit down about that game last week after making a massive fighting comeback, especially through the handling of Andrew Callaway to get himself over the try line a couple of times. They'll be really disappointed to have not seen themselves come away with a win last week. We've all heard it from Nick White saying that he thinks that the referees, taking the Rugby Championship away from them. There's still a big chance here for them to make a big performance coming in this second game. So in terms of the team that's been announced, not a great deal of changes to talk about, but again, some of the things we had from last week. So James Slipper, David Parecki and Alala Toa coming in that front row. Looking back at the stats that I had from last week, it looks like we had 4 of 7 scrums work for Australia, so scrummaging could be upped a little bit. I think they were definitely put under the cosh a little bit from some of the New Zealand forwards last week, so hopefully they have a good game this week. In the lock department, Jed Holloway at number 4 and Kadarin Neville, hopefully I'm going to pronounce his name right, I still struggle with that first name, but obviously of course Darcy Sway now going out with his ban for that tackle into the leg, so had to make a switch up here. Hopefully they get on okay in terms of the lineout. Again, lineouts last week, notes I had down from last week was they had 11 of 13. So, lineouts weren't working too badly for them. So hopefully they can keep that going in terms of that high percentage marker. In the back row then, Rob Valentini goes to the 6 shirt, Pete Samu in the 7 shirt, and Harry Wilson in at 8. Now, I believe there was an injury to Leota as well, so trying to just make the most of what you can of this team. Valentini and Samu both played really well last week, so hopefully they keep that going, get some tries potentially getting into this game. It'd be nice to see them use those strike forwards that they like to use so much. Get the power men over that try line. In the halfback partnership, Jake Gordon and Bernard Foley retained their 9-10 positions. Now, Jake Gordon getting his yellow card last week, which I did think was unfair. I disagreed with his yellow card, mainly because I had him in my fantasy team. No, that's not what it is. I genuinely think there probably shouldn't have been a yellow card for him. I don't think he really impacted that maul too much. But hopefully just, keep the discipline up. Hopefully the referee's a little bit less trigger happy with some of the cards this week. And hopefully Jake Gordon gets a bit of a better game. In terms of the centre partnership, we have Foketti and Ikitau retaining. Yeah, Ikitau quiet last week, struggling to really get into the game a lot. Centres weren't really anywhere in this game last week massively, bar on the receiving end of some nasty injuries, so hopefully they do okay. And then in that back three then we have Betty, Tom Wright and Andrew Kellaway, the man who did so well last week. I think arguably really kept Australia in that game right up till the end was Andrew Kellaway scoring some of those tries when they desperately needed them. Betty has again been quiet. He didn't really get that involved last week. Would like to see him have more hands on the ball and actually have some room. Let him run, make some big ground on the field. He didn't really get going last week again. They're just trying to shut down these wingers. Both teams are playing quite narrow. They were using a lot of the forwards last week. So hopefully we get to see this Australia team just explode into this game. You've got nothing to lose. You've got everything to play for. Might as well try and launch some of these backs. And in terms of the reserves then, we have Falo, Fainga, Angus Bell and Fama Musili, whose name I still struggle with. It's a hard name for me to nail down. Replacing forwards alongside of Nick Frost and Fraser McWright, who nice to see him get back on the pitch. Of course, scored some tries earlier on in this tournament as well. Maybe again they're going to hopefully think that the New Zealand forwards are going to be tired. Maybe that's the chance to put on a bit of a speedy forward later into that second half. Maybe you see him get a try later on in the game. Replacement backs Nick White, Reece Hodge rejoins the team, and Geordie Pataya in there as well. Again, starting this Nick White on the bench thing. I really don't know what the difference is between starting Nick White on the bench or starting. I would much rather see him starting. I think you'd have more control over the game. I mean, he might annoy the ref a bit. Maybe they're trying to just avoid getting the referee's ear a bit too much. Reece Hodge is obviously there because of the scoreline last week. I imagine is why he's come back into this team now. They're going to be wanting those late minute 3 points. If they come up from range, Reece Hodge is the man to do it. And then Geordie Pataya as well, just to get in there with, speed. He's a hard runner. He's a tough man to get in. He's quite a physical player as well. So again, late minute tries coming from the backs, potential there for Australia. So in terms of a score prediction, what do we think for this game? I think with the opportunity to win this championship, I can see New Zealand really going for this game. So I'm going to back New Zealand. They also have the home advantage this week. I think there's a big opportunity for them here. I'm going to say New Zealand to win. I think it'll be more than it was by the ending result last week. So I'm going to say New Zealand to win by, let's say 12. I'm going to say New Zealand to win by 12. But of course, guys, what do I know about rugby? Feel free to drop down in the comments your thoughts on the teams and your score predictions on the game. Remember to do your Super Brew teams because there's been some big switch-ups to the teams already. We will also be doing the preview for the South Africa versus Argentina game. So make sure you are subscribed just to keep up to date when that video comes out as well. I hope you've all enjoyed today, guys. I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.